Professor Aakash.
No, just say Aakash Chawade. Those are dirty.
My shoes look very tattered. I just
The
realized
shoes shouldn't be in the camera, otherwise it's something very wrong.
Hi, I'm Kara, and welcome to Aventure. Today we have Aakash Chawade. Welcome, and could you tell us a bit more about yourself?
I'm an associate professor at SLU, which is the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, and my research is focused on understanding how plants respond to stress, environmental stresses, diseases and so on, and how we can develop varieties that are better adapted to the local climate.
Fabulous. And when you say local climate, and I remember at some point you talked a little bit about climate change, for example, even in Sweden. Is that your current research focus? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, climate change, it is impacting the whole world in different ways. We often, when we think about climate change, we think about floods and droughts, extreme heat waves, and that is definitely already happening now in different parts of the world. But we are increasingly seeing these kind of events happening in the Nordic countries and in Sweden in the recent years. One of the focuses that I have within my research is to understand how these events will unfold in the future and how we need to prepare so that the varieties that we grow in Sweden in the future are better adapted to this expected change in the climate that we hope to see, we expect to see in the future.
Yeah, when you say that the kind of crops, what crops are we talking about?
So in Sweden, the biggest crop area-wise is forages. Forages are crops that are used as a fodder mainly.
For animal feed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Other than that, the close second are cereal crops. Then that's mainly for human feed, food and feed also for animals. And then comes horticultural crops, fruits and trees and berries and so on. And all of these different crops, they will be impacted by the climate change. One of the events that we have seen in the recent times is severe drought in southern Sweden. For example, in 2018, where we have seen drought at a scale where we have observed reduced yields significantly in that year. And there was then shortage of fodder for animals, but there was also reduced grain yield, cereal crops and so on. Then the question we can ask ourselves was, were we prepared in 2018 to face such a drastic change, severe drought? And the answer is no, we were not prepared. And so one of the key factors that we need to look into is how do we prepare ourselves in the future for such events when they occur. Of course, one of the aspects is the research, that we need to understand plants better so that we can develop varieties that are better adapted to such conditions. But other than that, it is also farming done in a way that it is more sustainable. We do not stress out our local environments too much. For example, when there is drought, we need to do farming in a way that we are less reliant on irrigating the crops rather than being more reliant on it. At the same time, drought coming in. So these are multiple challenges to think about.
Yeah. And you laid out that there's the research side and there's the farming side. I'm guessing that you're more on the research side of things. From that side, how do you go about mitigating these challenges, and what are the research methods that you would use to learn more?
The first and very important step when it comes to doing research is to talking. It's about talking to the breeders, plant breeders. It's about talking to the farmers, the advisors who advise the farmers. It's about discussing the challenges together and working as a team to try and address it. Once you have identified a challenge, the next step becomes how can you mitigate these risks in the short term and in the long term. What it could mean is to identify possibilities. For example, out of all the varieties that are grown out in the market today, try to identify those that are already now slightly better adapted to such climatic conditions, and maybe promote those varieties more to the farmers. That's a short-term goal, and that also leads to a short-term impact of the research. A longer-term impact would be then developing new varieties that can produce higher yield, at the same time would be more drought tolerant, or even more better resistance to diseases and so on.
So in the field of agricultural research, there are a lot of technologies available these days that help us in the quest of learning more about plants, developing new varieties. And where do you come in that kind of engagement?
Yeah, technologies are really at the forefront of advanced research. One of the biggest focus of my own research is indeed developing new methods and tools that can be used for speeding up the development of varieties. So a while ago we talked about how in the long term you can address these challenges of climate change by developing new varieties. And in plant breeding, variety development takes a long time. It takes several years, and it differs from crop to crop. And one of the challenges, and indeed the research question then, is to how to reduce this time for variety development. And then there comes in the critical role of new modern methods and tools for shortening this time. These modern tools can then also help with enabling us to evaluate more material at reduced costs. And then the question is, what are these modern tools? One tool that is becoming extremely popular in the recent times is something called genomic selection, which is about using modern advanced statistical tools for developing prediction models using genetic data to identify varieties or plant material with superior traits or superior qualities. That's using genetic data. The other kind of tools deal with using phenotypic data. For example, using sensors or images, so cameras, to take pictures of plants and understanding and studying how plants respond to the local environment where it is grown.
Could you elaborate more about what a phenotypic data is, or phenotypes?
Yeah, so a phenotype it has a very broad area. A phenotype is something that is expressed by the plant. It could be a morphological character, something that we can see. A flower, the shape of the flower, or the shape of the leaf, the number of leaves, number of flowers, many different things. So when you say phenotyping something, it means you are trying to measure, observe and measure that particular characteristic of a plant. And then the question is, how can you do it automatically? Because manually, if you are out in the field and you need to, let's say, take a simple example, measuring the height of wheat plants in the field. And that is a manual process which is laborious, takes time. And there, for example, one could use drones. You fly the drone over the field, a field where you have hundreds of such samples of plants that you want to evaluate, measure height. One could fly a drone which maybe takes 30 minutes to fly over the field, and using some very advanced image analysis methods, one could then measure the heights of all of these hundreds of samples in a much shorter time compared to taking a long big ruler, walking out in the field and measuring each and every plot manually.
Yeah. So is that what you do with the drones and camera?
Exactly, that's one of the examples of what we could do with the drones. The other examples could be studying plant stress, drought tolerance, how well the plants survive drought, how well the plants survive the disease pressure, how long did it take for the plants to mature, and so on and so forth. So in the academic research, we try to develop these methods in a way that could help us advance our knowledge of plants' response to stresses. But then there are also users who would like to use this technology in their current work, such as plant breeders. And so for that purpose, I also started up a company called Phenoyard. And the whole purpose of Phenoyard is to enable access to such advanced technologies to a broad range of users with least amount of effort from them.
So that includes breeders, does that include farmers into your list of users?
It mainly includes breeders, because breeders have these trials where they need to compare lots of different samples. And then it includes agronomists who also set up such trials where they like to compare different market varieties, for instance. So those are the main direct beneficiaries, so to say. And farmers are indeed the indirect beneficiaries of these methods, because when you use drones to find and identify an optimal variety, then that would mean that the farmer would benefit by growing that variety in that farm, potentially leading to better, more sustainable growth and better yields.
Yeah, and indeed in Sweden there are a lot of smallholder farmers. You can often find these cooperatives. So it's very interesting to see it, that people are growing different things, and then they're making choices for themselves on what to grow, what they think is the best for their own practices. So I guess that kind of enables this kind of research and input to be put in practice and for the benefits to be extracted as well.
Absolutely. I'd just like to add one more point, which is that when you automate analysis of these samples, it also means you remove the subjectivity. When you do manual evaluation, it is very subjective depending on who the expert is and what experience they have in evaluating all of these different material. With automation, one could hope to get similar results with no matter how many times you do the exact same thing on the same day.
Yeah, that's a clear advantage. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming to Aventure today. And how should we reach out to you if anybody is interested in your research and wants to find you?
You will find my CV page on SLU's homepage, of course. Google my name.
Okay, we'll put that